We have 20 attendees at the moment. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being here today. So first of all, if you need interpretation to French or Arabic, you can select it by clicking on the globe below on your screen. So I'm Nikki from Viva Salud, a Belgian NGO for the right to health, and I welcome you all to this webinar called Hazardous Pesticides, Why Do We Need a Ban? Organized by the Bissan Center for Research and Development, which is a long-lasting partner of our organization. So agricultural trade is growing worldwide, and with it also an agricultural model and agricultural technologies stemming from the Green Revolution of the 1960s. We are talking about the mechanization processes, but also about the use of seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides. The sales of pesticides have experienced tremendous growth in recent decades, especially in low-income countries. All pesticides entering the market are specially designed and developed to act on a living organism, disrupting its vital functions, which usually results in death. There is no question that their use has led to a series of disasters for humans and the environment. Moreover, it is because of their harmful effects on human health and of their impact on biodiversity and nature in general that their sale and use are controlled by numerous regulations. So countries worldwide make use of different regulations regarding the use of pesticides. While the European Union banned several hazardous pesticides already years ago, EU countries are still continuing to produce and export them. In the Philippines, a national prohibition on the import of certain dangerous pesticides, such as Carbendazim, simply doesn't exist. And in Palestine, it is prohibited to import pesticides forbidden for use in the country of origin because of health or environmental reasons. But unfortunately, these prohibitions aren't being respected properly. Pesticide companies based within the European Union export pesticides banned for use within the European Union to countries where there are strict regulations on the where there are less strict regulations on the use of pesticides. So this is actually not a violation of the EU law according to the letter, but it does violate a series of international commitments made by the European Union, for example, concerning human rights. Also, the Philippine government is not taking up its responsibility because they are not taking into account the adverse health effects that imported pesticides are causing. And in Palestine, the Palestinian Authority and Israeli states, which are responsible for regulations on imports, aren't respecting the existing laws. In France, a ban on the export of pesticides was adopted 2 years ago, and in Germany, it will be adopted next year. In Belgium, we will have a vote on a possible ban that will take place later this month. So Viva Salud is actually part of a Belgian coalition campaigning for an export ban. And also in Palestine and the Philippines, organizations are mapping the impact, the export and the import of pesticides, which are banned for use within the European Union already. So today they will proudly present their researches. So all of us demand for stronger import and export regulation and also the respect of already existing laws. This means that civil society organizations worldwide are organizing campaigns that go against the inhumane practices of producing, exporting, importing, and consuming hazardous pesticides. They ask the governments to take responsibility regarding the health of their workers, communities, and consumers. So today we have different speakers with us that will explain why it is necessary to implement bans on both the import and the export of hazardous pesticides. We have Dr. Angeliki Lysimarchou, which is the head of the Science and Policy Network, the head of the Science and Policy Department at Pesticide Action Network Europe. So she will explain the need for a European export ban and the ongoing policy processes at the European level. Then we have G. Estrada and Patrick de la Cueva, which are Philippine activists, and they will speak about the researches done in the Philippines on the importation of hazardous pesticides exported by the EU and its impacts on farmers and human health. Ubaya Budi from the Bissan Center for Research and Development and Wessam Ahmed from Al-Haq We'll speak about the import of European pesticides in Palestine and how importation bans are not respected by the Israeli state and the Palestinian Authority. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. All the participants will speak for about 10 minutes, and afterwards there will be room for a Q&A session. So please put your questions in the Q&A option. There's also my colleague Victor, who is present with us today. If you have any technical issues, you can ask him a question in the chat option. But your questions for the panelists can be posted in the Q&A session. We will start with Dr. Angeliki, because she cannot stay until the end of the webinar, unfortunately. So we can already have a small Q&A session of 5 minutes after her presentation before she leaves. Okay. So I repeat that if you want to select interpretation, you can do this below on your screen. We have interpretation to French and to Arabic, and also in the opposite way to English. Okay, so then I will give the floor to Dr. Angeliki, who can share her presentation now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. So let me share my screen. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes, it's working.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and for organizing this webinar. It's truly a very important topic. So and I'm looking forward to listening to the other speakers as well. So today I would explain in 10 minutes what has been done in Europe and what is going on right now with the efforts to stop this exports of pesticides that have been banned in Europe because of human health and environmental concerns to third countries that do not have the same safety laws. And I'm going to explain the efforts from the whole civil society, obviously not the whole, but I will try to also share the work of other partners of the coalition. And with this, I would like to first say a couple of words about the EU law on pesticides. So in 2009, our decision makers decided to turn what was previously a directive into a regulation. And in this way, it was legally binding. What was new about this regulation, it was that the priority above selling pesticide products was to ensure a high level of protection for humans, animals, and the environment. And we see also that the general public is included. So we move away that pesticides are toxic only for farmers and farm workers, and we recognize that they're toxic for all the general public, including children and pregnant women, for example. And we take into consideration not just the active substance that they are authorized, but also the products, the residues that live in the environment and our food, and also mixtures. And it also introduced what we call like a cutoff criterion. And why we call them like this, because when chemicals are identified as hazardous and have to be banned, they cannot be authorized in the EU market. And right now, this includes carcinogens, mutagens, toxic to reproduction, hormone disruptors or endocrine disruptors, POPs, PBTs, persistent bioaccumulative and toxic to bees, and a couple of more that I haven't included. And the exceptions are very few. There are exceptions, unfortunately, so not all of these have been banned, but in the majority, this is what the law says. And it also promotes safer alternatives. And here we have also another directive, which might become a regulation, which I'm not going to go into it, but it does promote a non-chemical solution in theory. And there is also microorganisms that can be used, and now they're entering the market, and also low-risk pesticides. And the law is also based on the precautionary principle, which means that we don't need to have all evidence. If we have some evidence that there might be risk, the decision makers can can decide to ban a pesticide and put a priority in protecting human or environmental health. So the EU law on pesticides, however, refers to products that enter the EU market and doesn't take any responsibility of what's happening outside. But nevertheless, you can see here especially after 2000, all the efforts on these legal procedures on pesticides to regulate pesticides have resulted in a very big decrease of approved active substances in Europe. And here the very dark blue shows the more dangerous, the more hazardous active substances, and you can see that they are getting gradually out of the European market. Of course, new ones enter, and sometimes these are not as safe as the law foresees, but this is another issue I'm not going to go into right now. But the overall message is that to some extent, this pesticide law has been effective in removing dangerous substances from the market. So what happens when there are health and environmental concerns? So these substances are banned or severely restricted in Europe. And then we enter to another field, which is the Rotterdam Convention. And this is the international convention to promote safe trade among countries when it comes to hazardous chemicals that have been banned because of human and environmental concerns. So this in Europe is translated to the PIC regulation, is prior informed consent, and it's about trade of these hazardous chemicals. And right now, I searched the database yesterday, and we have 208 pesticides and biocides that they are included in the PIC regulation. So what that means is that when these substances are exported, the countries that import them need to be notified, and they need to accept these imports. But it doesn't go much deeper than this. There is also an annex that bans exports completely from a country, but unfortunately, this is only about really toxic substances. So we're talking about persistent organic pollutants and then some mercury-based products and substances. Now, our concerns were much strengthened in 2018 when Public Eye published a report where they examined the exports from Europe to third countries. And they looked all these pesticides that back then were banned because of human health and environmental concerns. And not very surprisingly, as you can see here in this map, they found that in the majority, they're going to low and medium income countries. And when they investigated in the local laws, they found out that the laws were not definitely were not as strict as they should be for the use of such substances, which at the end of the day, they wouldn't be allowed for use. So in their investigation, Public Eye have identified the exporting countries. Here's on the left, the companies that export these chemicals, the name of the chemicals, and you see here some very toxic ones like paraquat or dichloropropene, and the countries that they import the substance. So you might have first the United States, but then you see All the other ones, so it's like the majority are yeah, like countries from the global south. Yes, so this is really, really concerning. And we also got another partner, Pan Germany. They also did an investigation with a focus on German companies. And here we talk about Bayer and BASF. And they also highlighted the big amounts of exports that take place from the country and where in the world they're going. And I'm inviting you to look into detail their findings, but they're also really concerning. And then, of course, when pesticides are sold to these countries, as they also find their way back in Europe, because we are a global market. So back in 2020, we thought, okay, let's have a look and see how many of these supposedly banned pesticides can be found in a European food. So we looked at the official monitoring data, and we found that we took out the PIC substances, so the pesticide substances that were registered in PIC. And here we found that, as you can see in this graph, a majority, like 61 substances, could be found in imports from non-EU countries, where to a much lesser extent these were found in Europe, but still they were identified. And of course, here we see like the unknown, which I'm not going to go into it, but unfortunately there are products that we don't know where they come from, and they seem to have the biggest amount of such pesticides. So there's two issues with the EU double standards. It's not only exporting, but also that, because we are one planet, these do find their way back to Europe. So in this way, we're trying to influence both the Europeans that they might are more concerned for Europe rather than what happens to the third countries. So we were successful because the concerns made the European Commission react. So in 2020, the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, the Commission committed to, as you see here, to lead by example and in line with international commitments to ensure that hazardous chemicals banned in European Union are not produced for export, including by amending relevant legislation if and as needed. So in few words, what they are proposing is that they're going to change the EU law so they can stop this practice of approving the export, the companies export these really dangerous chemicals to third countries. So that was not a very linear procedure, let's say. We had, as Nikki, you said, in United States and United Nations on Human Rights, they sent out a statement asking to stop this practice. And we also did, like a civil society organization, more than 70 organizations. We sent a letter to the Commission to welcome this commitment, but ask them to fulfill it and not leave it on the side. And this is a very serious issue. MEPs, members of the European Parliament, followed after our civil society letter and asking from the same demand to stop this unacceptable practice. But then in October 2022, when we were supposed to see a Commission's program for this year, this actually document was missing. So we were really concerned and we reached out to the regulators, but by different routes. But the most important one was a statement which we published in December of last year. It was signed by more than 300 organizations, and I hope from many of you as well. And in this statement, we have gathered all the facts, and we have gone a step further to explain how the Commission should do that, and we indicate that the peak regulations should be how these pesticides should be banned, because it's anyways looking into protection of human and environmental health globally. We also had a petition that I checked this morning, and it has been signed by 225,000 people. And we also have sent a roadmap of priorities to the Commission. We're going to send a letter this week. And we have a section specifically focusing on this. So you've seen we've been quite active. And it's good news that some countries are taking the lead, as we heard. So we have the case of France, which in 2018 is decided to stop the export of products that contain banned pesticide active substances. This was in force in 2022. But nevertheless, when we looked at the exports of France last year, we saw that some substances were still exported, which made us curious. But then we realized that the countries, they can ban the products that contain the active substances and not necessarily the active substances themselves. So France has exported some active substances that have been banned. Of course, we have to realize that the exports have been reduced. So it's a welcome move. Nevertheless, it's not 100% effective. And similar actions are now taking place in Germany and Belgium, and we hope that next year we have such laws in these countries too. So finally, after lots of negotiations, the European Commission, in this case is the Environment Directory, they launched what's called a public consultation, and they're asking for evidence from citizens and organizations to show that these chemicals have an impact in the countries that they are exported. And they also have a questionnaire, which at first sight, it looks really technical, but it's not as technical in the sense that it's not as difficult, let's say, because it is technical. But so what we've done is we're going to organize we're going to have a webinar this week on the 8th of June, and please, you're all invited to join to explain to people that are not familiar with the European Commission platform and how to take part in this public consultation and provide the evidence, or just your opinion. It has two parts, so you can actually also just express your concerns. And with this, I would like to thank you. I'm sorry if I passed the 10 minutes, but it was so much to say, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Angeliki. My colleague Victor already put the links in the chat for your webinar on the 8th regarding the public consultation, so that all the attendees can already save it. And then I think we might have time for one question, but we have to keep track of the time. So I'm sorry that we cannot take any more than that. Does someone of some of the attendees or maybe another panelist has a question for Angeliki?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Besides countries importing banned chemicals or chemicals, would the companies or plantation, because one plantation is Sumifru, which is owned by Sumitomo, we are sure they're using one kind of chemical that is banned in Europe, which I will discuss later. Could they also be liable besides the country that imports such chemicals?
Yes, so I'm not 100% sure if I got your question right, but what the EU law says is that the active substances, for example, for pesticides, but this is general for hazardous chemicals, they are exported for a specific use in the testing country. So you have cases where a pesticide active substance, it's banned to be used as a pesticide, but it can still be used as a biocide. So it can still be exported, but then what's happening at the country, it's down to the country itself, the government. So it's not, the EU has no, it claims no responsibility of what's happening in these countries. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, partly.
Partly.
Besides the government, because the one who uses it is a big company, it's a conglomerate. Because Sumifro Plantations in the Philippines is owned by a Japanese conglomerate, Sumitomo. So one of its business is just banana, but they have so many other businesses. So would they be held accountable besides the country?
Yes, they will if they don't specify the use, and then they are found that this is being used for something that is not specified, it's not within the framework of what they have claimed that this is going to be used. Yes, they could be fined accountable. Of course, I don't know to what level. If it's just like you have to send them a notification and say, this is a gap, please correct it, or there could be any criminal action.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Angeliki. There was one more question in the Q&A from Lina, who asked, is the public consultation open for non-EU countries? And I think the answer is surely yes, but I will let you explain it a bit more.
Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't make this very clear. It is, and that's why we need all the help we can have. We cannot do this alone. We're not alone. We are working with other countries, and we do invite everybody to take part.
Okay, thanks a lot, Angeliki. So I propose that we continue with the next speakers. I would say stay as long as you can, and thanks a lot already for your participation today. It was very interesting. So now I will give the floor to Guy Estrada from UMA and Patrick de la Cueva from Masipac. I will let them introduce themselves and also the research that they have been conducted. So please go on.
Hi, my name is G. Estrada. I'm a national staff member of UMA. In English is the National Federation of Agricultural Workers in the Philippines. We are the campaign and center of agricultural workers, mostly in sugarcane plantations, Cavendish bananas for export, pineapple for export, and palm oil. The last three are mostly owned, or many are owned by multinational corporations. We have a video later, but I think there's a problem with the sound, but it has an English dubbing. It was made jointly, by us, UMA, and the Pan-Asia Pesticide Action Network, Asia Pacific, as part of the 16 Days of Global Action on Agroecology from October 1 to 16, 2021. But of course, it's only one part, because the title of the webinar is Toxic Fruit Working Conditions Banana Plantation Workers in Mindanao. So the union president of the Sumifro workers, Paul Jan Dison, talked more about the working conditions of the workers. After that, we did a follow-up, a research in coordination with Namasufa, the union, from August 6 to 11, 2022, where our researcher interviewed 93 workers and ex-workers of Sumifro in, I think, 4 barrios or villages in Davao del Oro, which used to be called Compostela Valley. Then we found out that there are four chemicals which are banned in Europe. No, 2 are fungicides, chlorothalonil or mancozeb or daconil brand, and ditane, DITHANE. I don't know. And the second one, second 2 are like pesticides to kill pests. No, Lorsban and Mocap. No, Lorsban is chlorpyrifos, like that. And usually it's Sumifro who supplies the chemicals to its growers, no? Because they have plantations, or foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines under our constitution, but there's a law that they can lease or have growership agreements with local farmers. Meaning, if you are a grower, the company provides all the inputs for free, but you have to pay it later, no? When you harvest the fruit. But the company will be the one to dictate the price of the produce that you grow. So for Sumifro, for every 1 carton of Cavendish bananas, it's 190 pesos. No? It's less than $4. But that is 13.5 kilos. One carton is 13.5 kilos. So if you buy Cavendish banana in 7-Eleven in the Philippines, 1 piece is higher than one kilo. No? Because 1 piece can be as high as 17, but the average which for 190 is just 14 something per kilo. We have to know more, no? We are sure Lorsban is being peddled by Sumifro, but the other 3, because sometimes the growers can choose which chemical to buy or other inputs, no? So if they find something which is cheaper, they can buy that. So we have to deepen more our research. If the other 3 are only used by the growers, or they buy it, or is Sumifro the one supplying it also? No? Of course, there are many effects of the chemicals directly, no, to those working in the field, and different kinds of effects to the skin, the lungs, and there are extreme cases where there are cancer. No? So some people die of cancer. But other than that, there's even a family that was diagnosed by leukemia, but they have no history of leukemia. And also the communities, no? Because one kind of spraying done is through aerial spray, no? So it's not only in the plantations in the Philippines, particularly in Mindanao. There are also communities inside or very near the plantation, no? So they are also, even if there is no aerial spray, they call it the boom spray. If there is wind, no, it will also go to the communities. So usually, besides its effect on the people, it has also an effect on the vegetables that they plant, and also on them, no. But it's better we publish this later, no. What else? But of course, we are not doctors, no. So we have to deepen. Maybe next time, because we will campaign against this, we need to have a toxicologist to study more on the effects. There were studies before, no, by Dr. Romy Quijano. He was able to go to Sumifro once, but it might be good that he goes there again for deepening of the findings that we made. Maybe I leave it to that. Maybe the next speaker from Masipag, Patrick de la Cueva, can now start his presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, G, for a very well put discussion on the situation of plantation workers. Hello, hello everyone. It's a very hot afternoon here in the Philippines. I am Patrick de la Cueva. I'm the National Advocacy Officer from Magsasaka at Siyentipiko para sa pag-unlad ng agrikultura or Farmer Scientist Partnership for Development. So it's a farmer-led network of people's organizations, scientists, and non-government organizations collectively working towards the sustainable use and management of resources through farmers' control, of these resources, the agricultural production, and associated knowledge. So I will be sharing this afternoon about our campaign and research on glyphosate. So is my screen sharing now? Can you all see?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you, Patrick.
All right. Thank you, Nikki. So my presentation, hopefully it will be short, is about the social, economic, environmental, and health impacts of glyphosate. So this is based on two researches done by Masipag, one in 2012 and one in 2018, in various provinces in the Philippines. So glyphosate is an active ingredient of a common herbicide, which is widely used in rice, corn, plantation crops, and vegetables. And it's also used in lawns and gardens, public parks, railways, and in other areas which may be residential in nature or near residential areas. So it's known actually in many brand names. Most popular are Techweed, Spitfire, Sharpshooter, Karate, 888, among many others, and also the most notable, Roundup. It's a weed and grass killer. So it was commercialized. It has been commercialized since 1974, and it's the most widely used herbicide in the world, which is used in more than 160 countries. And its production amounts to 750 million kilograms per year. But this is the data from 2014. And from the recent spate of production of Roundup ready crops, such as in corn, cotton, and soybeans all around the world, the use of glyphosate increased also 15 times at that time. So in the Philippines particularly, the glyphosate is used in the production of the genetically modified corn. When it was commercialized in December 2002, it has already started the use in the Philippines. And then in 2006, when Roundup Ready corn was introduced, glyphosate was also used in its production, and in result, it increased the spraying and its use in many corn areas in the Philippines. And it also increased again when other varieties of GMO corn was approved for commercialization. So particularly, it's used for rice, corn, plantation crops such as sugarcane, palm oil, banana, pineapple, coffee, among many others here in the Philippines. And years ago, the Fertilizer and Pesticides Authority in the Philippines lists already more than 70 glyphosate brands. So if we look at the data today, when we look in the website of the Department of Agriculture, what we have is the 2021 data, but that's only up until June 2021. So the hectareage of GM corn plantations or areas where GM corn is planted already amounts to 600,000 hectares. So that's a very large area, for its production. And with this, if we would try to compute how much is being spent in these technologies, if we consider the price of the GM corn seeds being 10,500 Philippine pesos per hectare, multiplied to 600,000 hectares, with 2 cropping season, that amounts to 12 billion pesos. And if we include also the use of glyphosate in these GM corn areas, we will have 1 billion pesos already, and that's just for 2 cropping seasons. So in the Philippines, we really see the use of glyphosate as a big business, by these large corporations, with the help of a few government officials who enable the use of these technologies. And it's actually developed initially by Monsanto, which was later on acquired by Bayer. So in a study conducted by Masipag in 2012 to determine the socio-economic impacts of GM corn production, we saw that almost half of the cost in production were allotted to seeds, fertilizers, and herbicides. So that's a pretty huge amount, considering the socio-economic status of our farmers. Yet, given the investments done by these farmers, through self-financing or through loans, we see through our through the gathered data by Masipag with many people's organizations in the Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao Islands. We see very glaringly, negative net income, of our farmers, which ranges from a negative hundreds to negative tens of thousands. So I think many of us here agree that most of the inputs are very vulnerable to shocks, economic shocks, political, among many others. And we've seen the rise of costs of these inputs, and it's very dangerous, as it puts our farmers in a very vulnerable position. So one of the findings is that seeds become more expensive, including also the other inputs used in the production of GM corn. And since our farmers face this increase of cost and suffer from negative net incomes in their production, they resort to loaning money from usurers. So the proliferation of usury in growing GM crops increased also in these areas. And if we see it more broadly, the profit does not go to our farmers. It goes to the financiers, and in extension to the creators of these technologies, the marketeers of these technologies. And in a political aspect, if the farmers become passive recipients of these technologies, instead of becoming active participants in their production, farmers lose the control of the production assets. So this is a diagram made by our lead scientist in that research, Dr. Chito Medina, our former national coordinator and an environmental biologist. Considering also the cases in other GMO crop production, that GMO farming is the farmer's road to poverty. From farmers borrowing money for inputs to farmers borrowing more money for inputs, food, and other miscellaneous needs, as their income does not suffice to their family needs. And with the threats of their crops being damaged by typhoon, floods, pest infestation, and other effects of climate change, the farmer borrows even more money with unpaid debt and interest accumulating. So in the end, there are documented cases also of farmers selling their own land, or the lender takes over the land, which results also to farmers being more hungry with no control, ownership of their resources. They become poorer and more hungry. So that's actually a very popular corporate strategy. They create a problem, then they sell a solution. So that subjects farmers to a cycle of debt. So moreover, aside from socioeconomic impacts, farmers also experience, alongside with the members of the community, environmental problems. The glyphosate poisons the environment. They clear areas which were not supposed to be suited for GM corn cultivation, but they force GM corn cultivation in these areas. It erodes the soil. The use of this pesticide also kills adjacent crops, kills wildlife, including pollinators, and of course, it poisons our farmers, the community members and consumers. So this is a picture of GM corn cultivation area in Ginbialan, Maayon, Capiz. So this is located in the Visayas region. So this was taken in May 2015. This is another picture there. So this was captured by the researchers which conducted the research in May 2015 in the Capiz province. So this also. And so one more study we conducted in 2018 in Barangay Ginbialan, Maayon, Capiz is to identify if where the glyphosate residues are present. So we took a sample media of soil samples from our cornfields by collecting a column of soil up to 10 inches deep, water samples from nearby spring wells and river water, also the corn seeds and urine of our farmers. And in this research, we used the Abraxas glyphosate strip test. So the rapid tests are for the detection of residues, and it provides quality test results. So from the results, from the soil samples, there were 10 to 100, 2.5 to 100 parts per billion. So of glyphosate residue, from before the planting, after planting, and in other periods. So it was also seen in the water samples. It was also seen in the corn grain sample and the urine sample of our farmers. So this is a diagram.
Patrick, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Patrick, but can you conclude your presentation in 1 or 2 minutes, please?
Thank you.
I saw you have many slides left. So.
Yes. Okay.
Just
so
a time check. Thank you.
All right. So I'll try to speed this up. Okay. So this is a very simple diagram which displays how or where the glyphosate residues are seen in the production. So it's seen in the farmers, in the crops, in the air, in the soil, in water for a specific amount of days. So it's present in all environmental media, and it has been detected in the urine of our farmers. Thus, the recommendations to stop the use of glyphosate and our corn production. And with the quantitative monitoring of glyphosate residues must be done by our government agencies. And from a precautionary principle framework, use of glyphosate or our corn must be banned. Then lastly, sorry, Nikki, I just speed this up. It's also dangerous to our health. The World Health Organization already categorized glyphosate as a category 2A carcinogenic, which leads to cancer. there are many other negative health effects which was observed in many other research. So it's toxic to cells, birth defects, endocrine disruption, autism, tumor, kidney disease, and cancer. No, so there are many news surrounding many public media outfits which has seen the glyphosate presence in many products which is consumed by many people, especially in the United States. Was one most prominently in the big supermarkets of America. So it's also present, of course, if it's present there, it's present in many other areas using glyphosate. So there have been many cases against Monsanto, which led to Monsanto paying these people. One most notably is Dwayne Johnson, and there are many other court cases also filed against Monsanto. So I'm not gonna cover this again. With our call to ban the use of glyphosate and transition to a more agroecological way of farming, we actually tried to lobby in 2017 the banning of glyphosate in the Philippines. However, that's to no avail in the Congress. But we're still trying to conduct more community-based action research to provide more evidence on this and back the policy advocacy of many civil society organizations and farmer federations in the Philippines. So there are many actually countries who have banned fully, partially, and plans to ban the glyphosate, which is a very good context for us. It's a growing movement, from many other countries and also in the Philippines. So again, so just to reiterate our calls, corporations and our very own government should be held accountable in allowing glyphosate to be used in our country among many other highly hazardous pesticides and banned pesticides in the European Union, which poisons the environment and the people. It's not an option. We should not resort to using this, and instead we pursue agroecology as the alternative to the farming systems here in the Philippines and in many other countries. So apologies for speaking very fast. So yeah, I hope you had captured the messages from our research in a very limited time. Thank you. Nikki.
Thanks a lot, Patrick, for the extensive presentation. It was really interesting. So as you showed in the end of your slide, glyphosate is not yet fully banned in the whole European Union as well, but it will be banned in 2024. And I was wondering, so G, in your presentation, you talked about 4 pesticides. I didn't capture if these are chemicals that are banned in Europe, or if they are still allowed for use. Yes, they are banned.
And I forgot to tell also that glyphosate is also used in sumifero plantation as a weed killer.
Okay, but they are not banned in the Philippines yet.
It's not yet banned even in Europe. So I only listed 4 that are banned.
But those 4 pesticides you were talking about are banned in Europe, but not in the Philippines.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. And you still wanted to show the video.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't allow us to share sound, but we will put the link in the chat as well, so that you can afterwards look at it with sounds. But for now, there are subtitles, so we can just watch it like that. You can share your screen, G.
I will be the one to share.
Yes.
Wait. Sorry. I forgot.
I can see your screen already, but the video didn't start yet.
Yeah.
Yes, now it's working. Thank you.
47 ko katuig niya. Ako sa primero sa kasol pa ko ako sa area, pagkakuan na regular na ako sa planta. Nag-expose ko pinaagi sa pag-spray, nag-spray sa tipi. Ako nga obserbaran nga maglabad imong ulo, anong karas imong tutunlan, maglikod ka pag ginhawa, o sakit sa kuto-kuto. Sa akong mga trabahante, nagabati gihapon sila og mga sakit sa ulo, sakit sa tiyan. Ang uban gani na nangamata na po dahil sila ay kanang liver cancer, kanang colon cancer. Ay makahatag gid siya kadaot kay ang katong mga medisina bitaw nga sobra ilan pa na nang iba taon na ipaanod lang sa mga tapa. Makadaot sa mga hayop. Ang panawagan din ako nga undangon na niya ilahang pamaligya para masag nga wala na magamit na ini ay makadaot gini siya sa panglawas sa tao sa kinayahan.
Tulog at tuwid na ko nagtrabaho dito. Kung i-maintain ang area. Expose ko, mag-mixing ko, mag-apply. Yeah. Chemical, ilan po tayo na sukin dito. Ilan mo ba ng pagkakanta. Yan, labing dito. Hindi mo akong subod ka. Ngayon mo, kung sa'yo nakapangalan, naikuan mo. Ay, tayo na makakal na. Nagtrabaho ko sa plantation kisip harvester, 5 ko katuig nag-harvest. Alam ko ang ikasulti po, wala man po na ang uba na po din noon po na igo sa mga katulad nga na igo sa mga chemicals na katulad lang yung panggamit nga isong na po kayo ng chemicals. Sa mga po niya. Natural sa sapa nagi na sa sapa pod kay namo koy uban gud nga kabalo kani mga chemicals labi na ning pag-istorya ning sa tong sagingan sige na malikayan nga labi na ning mga spray nga manual lang spray mo ato biya ko na sa tubig so nagyud di malikayan nga agi koy madaot ana unta ila pong dili po kayo pero sa kuan manggod nag-agad man po sila sa mga kuan nagkaanam gyud kay sa mga tuang chemicals karon dili po nainayan na po ng kanila no kapag kuan sa ilang chemicals nga murag dili naman ang mga piste mo ibamatyon murag pati naman ang mga tao murag maipiktahan naman po.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we did have sound to the video, so that's a nice surprise. And in the chat you can find the original video, so you can watch it again or share it. So thanks a lot to Guy and Patrick for their interesting presentations. We will now proceed to Palestine, another corner of the world. I will first give the floor to Ubay Aboudi from Bisan.
Thank you, and thank you for all the amazing demonstrations and videos we saw earlier. We did research with Bisan on the issue of banned pesticides that are banned in Europe, but are still widely used and imported and produced for export to Palestine, not Palestine in particular, but for the global south in general. And we see this issue as a continuation of the colonial policies, where dumping policies of bad products that are carcinogenic, are implemented and sent to to developing countries because either they don't have the standards or they are not able to enforce these standards because of the lack maybe of the ability of the public sector. We were able to see that there are 4 types of of pesticides that are produced in Europe, that are banned for use in Europe, and those pesticides were found in the Palestinian market. And for Palestine, there is 2 folds for this issue. Some of these pesticides are imported directly to Palestine. Other pesticides are imported indirectly through the Israeli markets and Israeli settlers that are also pushing some of these pesticides inside the Palestinian market. In the Palestinian market, we also wanted to see if the agricultural sector, what are the standards for the Ministry of Agriculture on this? And there's a very specific law that unfortunately it's not being enforced, that any pesticide that is banned for use in the origin country is also banned for import and use in Palestine. The 4 types of pesticides we found were cyprin, that was produced in Switzerland, and it has an effective material, cypermethrin petroride, 200 grams per liter, and they also have it organic hydrocarbon solvent. So the organic word here is also like misleading, because people, when they see the word organic as an effective material, they think that it's natural. No, it's not natural, it's not organic. The second is polis, also produced in Luxembourg, and the effective material is chlorophenapyr, 240 grams per liter, and Evisects, which is produced in Belgium, and it has a thioclime hydrogen oxalate. This is the effective material, and the Plectran, which is produced also in Luxembourg, which is also named cycloxanine 600 with a concentration of 600 grams per liter. So we went to the Palestinian market. It's actually what we did was really straightforward. We went to the Palestinian market, to the Palestinian farmers, and we found those different pesticides in the Palestinian market. So if we zoom a little bit here, this is the Evisect. It has Arabic writing on it because this is imported directly by Palestinian merchants. If you look at the case a little bit down there, you will find the names of the importer and the Belgian company that produces it. And this pesticide, just to understand why it was banned, it is for the effective material that's in it. It is found in the pesticide Evectus, and its risks are acute and dangerous toxicity in case of ingestion, severe poisoning when contact with skin, highly toxic to aquatic life, highly toxic to aquatic life with long-term effects. The liver and kidney are among the most toxic organs of this substance. So those are the most affected organs are the liver and kidney. And this substance affects the reproductive system in both males and females, in addition to reducing reproductive capacity. And this is according to the European research and standards. So this is banned from consumption in Europe, but it is allowed to be produced there for the aim of export to other countries that have not banned it yet. In the case of Plectran, which is produced in Luxembourg, country of origin, you can see that the case of the pesticide, the covering is in Hebrew. This is not imported directly, but seeps to us through the different Israeli settlers and organizations and traders and companies that sell this to Palestinian farmers without warning them of the effect of these dangerous pesticides. So it's found the active material in it is acute and dangerous toxicity in case of ingestion, causes acute toxicity when inhaled, highly toxic to aquatic life, highly toxic to aquatic life with long-term effects. So the this is a US. We also found some US also toxic materials in here, but the US is different in terms that they have very relaxed laws in terms of pesticide use. So almost everything is allowed there. Almost, I'm saying, but not of course all. Ibrodion is also allowed in the US, and it's also highly toxic with even worse effects than the previous pesticides. We also found here a sapermetine, which is produced in Switzerland. This is also, you can see the case, it has Arabic markings on it, Arabic and Hebrew markings, so it's imported by both Israeli and Palestinian traders. It has acute and dangerous toxicity in case of ingestion, causes acute toxicity when inhaled, causes irritation in the respiratory system, as well as toxic effects on the respiratory system, highly toxic to aquatic life, and highly toxic to aquatic life with long-term effects. Okay, there's another. And so this is the last one that's produced in Europe. It's Polis. It's written as police, but it's pronounced Polis. I don't know what the different pronunciation. So it's acute. It's produced in Luxembourg. It has acute and dangerous toxicity in case of ingestion. Causes acute toxicity when inhaled. Highly toxic to aquatic life. Highly toxic to aquatic life with long-term effects. So these are the different pesticides that were found in the Palestinian market. When talking to the farmers on how they are using these pesticides, we found out that farmers usually also, because there's zero governance or there's zero oversight on them, they mix different kinds of pesticides in order to have a more effective material. And sometimes we even seen some farmers doing hand mixing of different pesticides together in a single canister and then spraying this. We were able to find that the diseases associated with this, like respiratory syndromes, cancers, kidney problems, because it also goes into the water, are prevalent in the Palestinian territories, but are also more prevalent in areas where there's high agricultural activity in those areas. Maybe it's also important to say that no chemical that's used in agriculture or in any other way that has interaction with our food system is safe. All chemicals have side effects, and especially these kinds of chemicals have long-term side effects, because even the ones that companies state that those are safe, they do not know if they are safe on the long term. They do not know how they would react in a dynamic environment where the different pesticides will interact with the nature, the life, the people will ingest it, what's the effects of the accumulation of these toxicities in human bodies on the long term. All of those are unknowns and are most probably also very poisonous. So the recommendations for this research, we recommend that states do not have some double standards for the production, use, and export of chemical pesticides by adopting a single standard for the production, use, and export of pesticides in the industrialized nations. Make amendments to the list of pesticides allowed and prepare a list of banned pest substances and a list of dangerous substances that are not used in pesticides and why they are not. For example, the PA, we found in the list of allowed pesticides the same pesticides that should be banned according to Palestinian law. And the Minister of Agriculture had no idea why it did not ban them. So strict application of laws on handling and use of pesticides, such as special laboratories to inspect the residues in agricultural crops before they are allowed to circulate in the markets, These laboratories should be distributed in a suitable manner in all provinces. Training of farmers in non-invasive control methods, activate the work of inspectors at the Ministry of Agriculture, and have continuous evaluation and follow-up with the imposition of penalties on those who violate the pesticide use and trade regulations and do not implement them as required. Stop the use of dangerous pesticides by the Israeli occupation on the border areas and not allow the smuggling of pesticides from Israeli markets. Support farmers with safety materials, and this is a transition measure, because we believe in Bisan that agroecology is the way forward for farmers, where you have sustainable agriculture that is safe for the people, safe for the farmers, and can have positive effects, not just only financially on the farmers, but also on their psyche and on the well-being of the community. So we are trading right now well-being, the notion of well-being, with the notion of chemical farming. One last note is that this pesticide issue also demonstrates the deep colonial nature of capitalism, where the lives of, and its racism, of course, where the lives of the citizens of Europe is considered important for decision makers in Europe, but the lives of people in the global South, where they do not have such enforcement from their governments, is not considered a priority in front of profits. Thank you, and hope this was quite clear.
Thanks a lot, Ubay, for showing the reality of pesticides in Belgium, in Palestine, and how also countries such as Belgium are actually complicit in human rights violations. So we have one more panelist for today, which is Wessam from Al-Haq. So please, Wessam, present yourself, and you can show your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Ubay, and thank you to all the previous speakers for involving me in this very important webinar. I think it's opened my eyes to an issue that has been under the radar. I think at Al-Haq, we addressed the issue of corporate accountability and the role of businesses in the Israeli colonial enterprise. And as Ubay mentioned, this is one element of it that is unseen, but the impacts clearly are very devastating, and it's important for us to be able to highlight these issues and find ways to address it. And the challenge, of course, in being able to address it is what are the tools that are available. The call for an outright ban obviously is the best way to go to prevent these products from being available in the first place. But as was mentioned before as well, that this is very much a symptom of the continued evolution of colonialism in its different forms. In Palestine, we see a very contemporary manifestation of the classical form of colonialism, but in much of the global South, there's this neo-colonialism and exploitation of the global South for the benefit of the global North, and this is a clear indication of that. One of the questions that was asked about the potential for holding these corporations accountable. This is a question that we are asking ourselves on a regular basis with regard to many different corporate activities. And the key distinction I think that needs to be made is whether in theory corporations could be held liable, and then whether in practice they are actually held liable, and if there are mechanisms that can be utilized to achieve that form of remedy that we seek. And unfortunately, whether it's with regard to corporations involved in the production of pesticides, or the corporations involved in the construction of Israeli colonies in occupied Palestinian territory, the limitations on the legal framework that allow this to happen are many. And in order to really address this, we need to close these loopholes that feed in to the economic incentive structure that benefits the profiteers and the marketeers, as was mentioned, and those that develop such products and enhance the legal and regulatory framework that could potentially put these corporations in a situation where they are going to tangibly be held liable, whether under criminal law or civil law. But these laws need to develop. And I think in addition to the ban on these products, there needs to be more concerted effort on developing the legal framework of accountability for corporations that are involved in the production of these products and their sales abroad. And it's important to keep in mind the asymmetrical power balance of those that are exporting these products and those that are importing these products, because under the UN guiding principles of business and human rights, the state has the primary duty to protect, and the corporation has the responsibility to respect those laws. But the unfortunate reality is those laws are so filled with loopholes that the corporation can claim respect to the laws because the laws are so weak and unable to limit their activities. So the issue needs to be addressed in a holistic manner. And one of the key areas that we are working on, and I think many of the other panelists are involved in one way or another, is the pursuit of a legally binding instrument that puts corporations as subjects of international law and puts binding obligations on corporate activity at the international level. This is something that has been pursued for the past 50 years. And in fact, just last year, we commemorated Salvador Allende's speech before the General Assembly on the risks associated with allowing these multinational corporations to continue to exploit the global South. So this is part of an ongoing struggle. And I think this is a good example of why we see Palestine as a microcosm of global injustice and the need to address things on a global level, not only for the benefit of the Palestinian people, but for humanity as a whole. And on a final note, one unique example, perhaps within our context, is not only that these herbicides and pesticides are entering the Palestinian market and entering the Palestinian land and water, but there's also weaponization of these herbicides, and the Roundup was mentioned as an example, and we've seen this example highlighted within the Gaza Strip, and how this herbicide is used in a way to devastate the agricultural fields and make them unusable. And so that dimension of the weaponization of these herbicides within the Palestinian context is also something that has been challenged, but unfortunately using the Israeli judicial system, which is part and parcel of the colonial enterprise, those attempts at accountability have fallen short. So the struggle definitely continues, whether it's within the Palestinian context or at a global level, but it definitely requires concerted action. And I'm very honored to have been able to be involved in this discussion and look forward to being involved in addressing this issue moving forward together. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Wessam, for this final presentation, which was once again very interesting. And I think it's you highlighted some very important things, like, for example, that it's not just a question of an export ban or even an import ban, but we also need to prevent the loopholes by other legislations. And you also touched on the systematic and structural faults in our world system, in fact. And I think also one thing that has been made very clear by all the presentations of today is that we really need to work together, the different social movements from all over the world, because this is not just something that is happening in Europe or in Palestine or in the Philippines. It's happening everywhere. So there are so many things that we can learn from each other. and also so many ways through which we can reinforce each other. I also warmly want to invite you to a global meeting in 3 weeks on the 27th of June. This is a global online meeting organized by the different organizations which are already present here today. And the aim of this meeting is to really have in-depth discussions about how social movements worldwide can reinforce the struggle against pesticides. So we will have breakout sessions, regional breakout sessions, but also global breakout sessions on, for example, power mapping of policymakers, on countering arguments of the pesticide industry, on building coalitions, etc. So this will really be a very important moment. And I'm really looking forward to hear about all the different campaign strategies and experiences of social movements worldwide. My colleague has shared the registration link in the chat. It's a 3-hour meeting, but I promise you that it will be worth it to participate. So please register. And also during this meeting, we will have interpretation to French, Arabic, and to Spanish, and to English as well. So I hope that all of you will be able to be there. So for now we have 5 minutes left, and I really want to ask the attendees to put questions in the Q&A option for our participants. And Lina, I see your question already in the Q&A. Of course, we will share the recording of this webinar, also the different presentations that have been shared, and the contact information of the speakers to all of the participants, so that all of you will have access to these informations. So please add questions to the Q&A for our panelists. And I also invite our panelists to ask questions to each other, because I'm sure they also have a lot to exchange. So if any one of the panelists wants to pose a question, please feel free to do so.
No questions on my part, Nikki. Thank you.
Anyone else? I see no questions in the Q&A option as well. So I'll give you 1 more minute to type your questions, and otherwise we will close the webinar in 2 minutes. In the meantime, I also already want to thank our interpreters for today, Numer, Alizé, and Morgan, who have done a magnificent work today. It's really thanks to you that this webinar is accessible to a broad range of people. So thanks a lot for being here. Okay, so if there are no questions, I suggest that we will continue our discussion on the 27th of June. And I also want to remind all of you to really participate in the public consultation organized by the EU. So as Angeliki already mentioned in the beginning, the PAN is organizing a webinar on the 8th on how to contribute to the European consultation. So please do so. And I also really want to thank our participants of today. Personally, I have learned a lot, and it was so inspiring to hear all of you talking. I think also the different presentations really went well together. It touched upon different different issues regarding the pesticide problems. So thanks to all of you for being here, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon or evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.